Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, and because there was a Game of Thrones panel in Hall H, I am on your YouTube page reacting to it. Before we get into everything that we learned here in San Diego at Comic-Con at the final gathering of the Game of Thrones cast, do me a favor, go down and hit subscribe. Turn on your notifications because every single time that we do a video like this on our YouTube page, you guys will be the very first ones to hear about it. With this video because there's things I need to write down and I'm going to get people's names wrong. Just to give you guys some context about what happened in Hall H here at San Diego Comic-Con, a chunk of the cast showed up to reminisce about their 8 seasons filming Game of Thrones and to address some of the concerns about Season 8. The characters who were there, because I would butcher the actors' names unfortunately, were Jaime Lannister, Sir Davos was there, Varys was there, and freaked me out because Varys had hair. And every single time that the actor spoke, like I recognized him and heard his voice. But, just him having hair took me out of it completely. Arya Stark was there as well. Maisie Williams obviously got the biggest response from the crowd as she came out. Bran was there. King Bran, as we all refer to him now. And Grey Worm, who I think got the best answer of the evening when he addressed this controversial reveal about his character.
When the slavers castrate the boys, did they take all of it? The pillar and the stones?
But I want to start with something that I consider to be somewhat controversial, and this is beyond the fact that showrunners, D&D, decided at the very last minute not to come. They had to actually come on stage before the panel began and say something along the lines of, hey, fandom is for everybody, and we all have different opinions, and everyone's opinion is valuable, but let's remember not to be mean, even if you disagree with certain directions that shows might go in. He wasn't mentioning Game of Thrones specifically, but it was a very veiled threat to the people in the crowd of, be nice, we know they're coming off of a controversial season, but if you get a chance to ask questions, let's try to keep it civil. And no fan got a chance to ask a question, which I find to be kind of ludicrous. Like, okay, the showrunners don't want to come. Maybe they don't want to address the controversies of Season 8 head on. But this was a great opportunity for the cast to answer some questions for fans who, believe me, waited in line for hours, nay, days to get into that hall. And I can tell you, as the Game of Thrones panel ended, 90% of the people who were in that hall left, which A, makes me feel bad for the preacher people who were having a panel afterwards, but B, showed me that the fandom was there for Game of Thrones to get an opportunity to speak. There was actually a girl dressed up like Dany who was being interviewed by a camera crew on her way out, and she was near tears because she was going to be one of the first people at the microphone to ask a question and never got that opportunity. And of course, the camera crew, as I was passing her, asked what she thought about Dany's fate. And this girl was not having it and was giving her opinion, and it was actually pretty funny to hear her say. So maybe it was a good idea that they didn't let the fans go. But I still think they should have had an opportunity to at least maybe thank the cast for their contributions to 8 seasons of entertainment and maybe to get some probing questions in regarding the production. Because the theme of the panel overall was a very warm sense of nostalgia. Like, there was a montage at the beginning where they addressed footage from all 8 seasons. And it was a reminder that, hey, even if you have issues with Season 8, there were some spectacular moments that were captured over the course of this montage. And that Game of Thrones, for all that it contributed to the pop culture landscape, really did give people some great water cooler conversation for however many years, almost 10 years that they did running the show. Could be even a little bit more than that. That sense of nostalgia and appreciation was also really felt by the cast, and it was great to sort of have them go back and tell stories about being together, things that they took from the set away. Apparently, Sir Davos is a kleptomaniac and took as much stuff as he could possibly get from the set. Bran admitted that he kind of scurried around at the last minute to find something sentimental and only ended up with a wooden spoon. And then the actor who plays Samwell Tarly was really funny. He admitted that personally, he's just somebody who feels really bad about getting caught all the time or being in trouble all the time. So he would never do anything to sort of break the rules. But then they sort of diverted in saying, oh, he's like Sam in that sense. And he's like, no, Samwell Tarly steals all the time. Like, that dude's a kleptomaniac. He steals books all the time. And someone shouted out from the crowd that Samwell stole a baby. And he's like, I didn't really steal a baby. I didn't steal Gilly. She's not like a goat. She's a person. That was a really nice little sidebar. They kept circling back around to Maisie Williams. Obviously, she was the highlight of the panel. People wanted to know a lot of, in a fan fiction sort of way, like what happened to these characters afterwards. And Maisie sort of made a comparison of Arya being like Dora the Explorer, but a lot more stabby. And she might even be rocking a bob in the area west of Westeros as she moved around. Bran was a noble king, everybody believes, and because the three-eyed ravens tend to last thousands of years, he didn't think he would be succeeded by anybody anytime soon. There were a lot of questions about Jaime and Brienne. Should Jaime have survived the falling stones that landed in a very specific spot where he happened to be? And actually, Jaime Lannister admitted that he was very proud of his ending and had no problems whatsoever for it, which elicited some boos from the crowd. And again, maybe that sort of showed that the natives were restless and wanted to comment. But of course, everyone did ask, like, if Jaime survived and clawed out the rubble with his golden hand, would he have found Brienne? And he said, yeah, that probably would have happened. So, shippers, you can make that happen. But I'm going to throw some cold water on a relationship that people wanted to see, which was Arya and Gendry. And Maisie Williams had a really clever way of sort of saying that they would never have gotten together. Even if she came back from her journey and caught up with Sansa and then met Gendry again, too much time would have passed and those two would not be an item. She kind of said it would be one of those awkward things where maybe they were at like a family wedding and you kind of bump into an old person that you used to date and awkwardly just sort of admit like, oh, hey, how are things going? So that is not going to happen. It was just a sweet panel, though. Like, no news broke out of it. They didn't discuss the prequels. They didn't discuss any potential spin-offs, although every single time that the idea of a character continuing with its story in some form, that got a huge cheer from the crowd. But it was very clear that this was a finale. Like, this was the last chance for this cast to officially get together at Comic-Con, a convention that has been very good to them over the years. I think they made it clear that they had come to almost every single con prior to this, and how this one was different because previously they were always dealing with spoilers, things that they couldn't discuss. And in this one, they were free to really get into any sort of conversation that they wanted to. But all of them really came to terms with the fact that they were content with how Season 8 played out. And Jaime Lannister's confession to it was, look, no one was ever really going to be happy with the ending because it's something that you love coming to a close. And that might be a cop-out ending, a cop-out answer to how the show ended. But again, it is a struggle to please everybody. I understand. And it's never going to be as good as you necessarily want it to be. And that's why those shows that do manage to stick the landing, as rare as they are, become somewhat special. So the panel didn't change anyone's mind about how Season 8 ended. D&D didn't come and defend their honor. And the cast never got to answer any questions from diehard fans, which I think is really disappointing. So overall, I thought the panel was a nice way to say farewell to a handful of the cast. Some real heavy hitters who didn't show up. I would have loved to have seen Peter Dinklage come. Would have loved to have seen Cersei obviously show up. And the assortment of people who did come was odd. It was great to hear from them, but I don't think that they were the biggest names that the show could offer, and it makes me wonder if they're uncomfortable with how the show ended. But in general, I thought it was another sort of stop on the farewell tour. But I also feel like these Game of Thrones actors, much like some of the Harry Potter franchise characters or the Lord of the Rings characters, will make this into a career. They all sort of talked about how none of them want to do anything like this in a period setting or in a fantasy setting because they just feel it'll be too close to trying to replicate what Game of Thrones did. Arya actually specifically said, or Maisie Williams specifically said, I can never really do a role where I have to pick up a dagger because it's going to be immediately compared to Arya. And I think that's fair. I think they're all going to sort of have to branch out and do something as different from Game of Thrones as possible. So if this is the last chance that we get to hear from them about what they accomplished in Game of Thrones, then I would say that it was a decent send-off, but I would have loved to have seen the fans who waited in line to get into the hall have an opportunity to talk to the people who made this show that ended up being so special for so many different people. If this is the first time that you are hearing me talk about Game of Thrones, well, you're in luck. We have an entire reaction series that goes from Season 1, Episode 1, all the way through the finale of Season 8. So just head over to our playlist where you can find all of my reaction videos to Game of Thrones. And that is just a sliver of the content that we are putting on CinemaBlend's YouTube page. So make sure that you go down, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and keep up to date with everything that we're doing here on our YouTube page.